Hi, everybody. Wanted to educate you on an idea that Lance brought to my attention. He actually started emailing some folks about this, and I wanted to get the word out to as many folks as we could. Maybe this idea makes sense for you, maybe it doesn't. Please reach out to us. We can kind of crunch the numbers and see if this does make sense. But this is an alternative to any cash, money market, savings, checking you might have that's earning a pretty low interest rate. But then when we look around, inflation is substantially higher than we've seen in a long time. So what we're talking about today are savings bonds, actually. And this is probably the first time since Lance and I have been in business that we've taken a good hard look at savings bonds. What we're specifically looking at are Series I bonds. This is not something that we're able to purchase for you. You do have to do this yourself, and you do have to do it online at treasurydirect.gov. It's a government website. I'm going to bring that website up so you can see it on the screen. If you decide to move in this direction, make sure this is the website you're using, treasurydirect.gov. There is a way to buy the paper versions of them. You can't buy them in the banks anymore, unfortunately. But the only way to get the paper version is if you have a federal tax refund, and you can cash that refund in for paper bonds, but only up to $5,000. Wouldn't even consider that as an option. So let's just assume we have to do this online at the government site. You can purchase up to $10,000 per person per year in I bonds. And once you cross the $25 mark, you can then buy any increment above $25, even to the penny. I kind of thought that was interesting. So let's learn a little bit more about these. I bonds are actually 30-year government bonds. Don't let that intimidate you. You do not have to own these or hold on to these for 30 years. In fact, the minimum holding period is 1 year. But if you cash these out after a 5-year period, you can sell the bond or liquidate the bond without a penalty. And we'll talk about the penalty here in a second. Like I said before, it's a minimum of a 1-year holding. So, maybe this makes sense, maybe it doesn't. If you have an immediate need for cash, obviously don't tie it up for a year. But after 1 year, if you decide to sell the bond, there is a penalty, but it's not a principal penalty. It's an interest penalty. You actually give up 3 months of interest. So one thing to keep in mind is the I bond will never lose value. The interest rate will never go below zero. So it's like a CD in the sense that if you cash it in early, CDs work the same way. You give up a few months of interest, but your principal is always intact. So let's talk about interest, because that's kind of the big deal here. The interest rate right now through the end of April, I apologize for the last minute notice on this. This is something we wanted to get our arms around a little bit. But the interest rate right now through April 30th is 7.12%, which is pretty high. These rates reset every 6 months. May 1st and November 1st of each year, the rates reset. We don't know for sure what the May rate's going to look like, but we're thinking it's going to be at 9.62%, which is pretty incredible, okay? So I have a few examples here that I want to run through that I think might be important. Again, I apologize for the late notice. I know April 30th is knocking on our door. If you can get in there and do it before then, great. If not, don't lose sleep over it. It's not a big deal. So let's look at an example. If you were to get in before the end of April, you would lock in that 7.12%. That's the current interest rate. But then on May 1st, the rates reset, and we think they're going to go to 9.62. So for another 6 months until November 1st. So what you get then is a blend, an average between the 7.12 and the 9.62. And if you decide to cash in after you hold it for 12 months, remember you give up 3 months of interest. After that year, that blended rate after the penalty is about a little over 6.25%, which is really, really good for a federally backed investment. Okay. Let's say you don't get in before the end of April. No big deal. I think a lot of folks are going to be in this ballpark. You buy them in May. Like I said, we think the interest rate's going to be 9.62%. The only caveat there is we don't know what the rate's going to be in November. Okay? So when the rate resets again in November, it could be higher than 9.62%. We don't know. If inflation is in fact higher, then it does behoove you to wait until May. We just don't know. Let's assume inflation's a little bit lower in November than it is today. And instead of being at 9.62, we drop down to 6%. Okay. Then we get a blend between the current or the May rate that's about to come out and then the November rate, which we don't know. And let's assume it's 6. If we do that, we blend those two together, we cash in after a 12-month period, again, giving up 3 months of interest, and we're looking at like 5.85% net in your pocket from a federally backed investment. Pretty darn good, okay? So the last thing I want to show you is you can freeze this screen, pause this screen, just to kind of, a couple things that we think are important. I never really covered number 3 in my little flow chart there. Lastly, another kind of important and beneficial reason to have these is I-bonds are exempt or tax-free on the state and local levels. There is federal tax on them, but they are state and local tax exempt. There are situations where if you cash these in, the interest is federally tax-free if you use them to pay for higher education college expenses. Not always, but sometimes. So just assume state and local tax-free, another benefit to these. By all means, if you have questions on this, please reach out to us, call us. We thought this was a good idea possibly for, an alternative to cash. Maybe it makes sense for you. Maybe it doesn't. Reach out. Appreciate you guys tuning in, and we will see you soon.